Okie dokie. So here's the deal. I am wearing my green jacket, and we were not because I played in the Masters golf, but because today we're going to be talking about yeah, we're going to be talking about money. I'm sitting here in my multi-million-dollar studio, which is on the top floor of my house, and I thought today it would be useful to talk about money management. Now, if you need a topic area, this is about living debt-free. Okay? So I've got the green jacket on. Green, we're talking about green. We're talking about financial peace. And some of you, I don't know where you are financially, but I was reading an article the other day that said that they're the two biggest, there we go, the two biggest challenges for people now in their 20s and 30s were number one was time management. They had to figure out how to manage their time and discipline themselves with schedules. The second thing they were having trouble with, not in any order, was money management. So most people are living in debt, okay? And I won't have you raise your hand if you're in debt. A little bit of debt is not a big problem. A lot of debt is a problem. So I'm going to be sharing some information that I stole directly from someone I met years ago named Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey. He wrote several books, one of which came out probably 15 years ago, maybe longer, but it was called Financial Peace. Financial Peace. So if you're like, I really need a book on money management and how to get my mind right about wealth and wealth management, Financial Peace is a great start. Another book that he wrote, and I might be sending out lots of links to you in my follow-up email with this recording, but he wrote another really good book called The Total Money Makeover. And he has an entire case study on the Southwestern company, which many of us have talked about and I worked with for a long time. Some of us worked with for a number of years. So today is going to be talking about how to live debt-free. And I'm going to give you a few steps to get out of debt. He actually has 7 baby steps to go from debt living to wealth and wealth management, but we may not get that far today. So here's the first thought. I would say if you haven't done so far, don't go into debt. The best way to prepare yourself for the worst, which is living under the fear of debt and creditors and people pursuing you who want their money, is to never allow yourself to go into debt. And that means credit card debt too. Now, I got to tell you, when I was younger, about 20, I thought, you know what? I need to build up my credit rating. So what did I do? I went out and applied for about 20 different credit cards because I thought it was cool to have a separate wallet full of credit cards. There were gas cards, petroleum cards, there were store cards, there were Visas and MasterCards and Discover. I had all kinds of cards. Now, I didn't max them out or go crazy or go into debt. I paid them off every month. That was kind of smart. But having all those cards was, if I'd had no discipline, it could have been a major problem in my life. I had a good friend, and she lost it on credit cards. So thankfully, she's recovered. But according to the American Bankruptcy Institute, I guess that's an actual institute here in America, they study people that are bankrupt and companies. About 70% of the people who file for bankruptcy do that due to credit card problems, okay? And I got to tell you, debt can really destroy you as life goes on. So we're going to talk a lot about that probably do a couple calls on this, not so much debt, but maybe wealth management and how to think about money, since that's a big problem, especially for people here in America. If you're not having a problem with debt, don't move here because everybody seems to be in debt. They're like, hey, I want that. Can you wait? No, I've got to have it now. I've got to have stuff that's just as nice as all of my friends. In fact, I've got to have stuff that's better than my friends. And if I have stuff that's better, I got to have more of it. And if I have more of it, then I got to have different. Remember that? Okay, so that's a big problem. The mentality of having to have everything right now, especially when you're young, there's tremendous pressure to look cool and be good and drive a cool car and have a big house and all that kind of stuff. But we got to get control of our money. So one thing we're going to talk about in the future is your mindset about money. Okay. So we're going to have to start managing our money. And if you do have any kind of debt, we're going to talk about how to get out of that today. Because if you're a leader, you have got to lead others toward financial freedom, not financial bondage. Okay. So you're like, okay, you mentioned Dave Ramsey and you're taking material from him. Yes. He used to be a neighbor of mine. He lived right over there around the corner. You can't see that, but he was a neighbor of mine, and he came and worked with Southwestern for a couple seminars. We did all-day meetings with him. But he's an interesting guy because more than 25 years ago, he fought his way out of bankruptcy and millions of dollars in debt. Millions of dollars in debt. So some of us are like, I'm a little behind on my payments, or I've got this really high interest credit card I'm trying to pay off. He was actually millions of dollars in debt. So what he learned by slowly bailing himself out of that turned into what he called Financial Peace University. And that's a program that he developed that's helped about 5 million people change their financial situations here in the States. So he's got a radio show now. He's got a podcast, the Dave Ramsey Show, and about 13 million people listen to him every week. And if you're counting, that's more people than listen to me every week. So make a note of that. But he's got a lot of listeners. And if you're interested, as we go through this, I'm going to give you like 3 steps to work on to get out of debt today. But there's a really good email series that's free. It's like a 4-day thing you can sign up for. I can send you the link if you want that. I may include that in the follow-up. So he's worked with tons of families. I got to tell you, the reason why this is of interest to me is because my in-laws have really suffered because they have letting their finances gotten out of control. They weren't foolish. As they grew up, they saved. My wife's mom was a banker. My wife's dad was an engineer, worked in a Anderson Windows plant. So they had saved up pretty well. And as they approached retirement, 2 things happened. Number one, they started letting a gambling habit take over. Gambling can be fun, but gambling can destroy you, especially when you're gambling a lot. So that got him into trouble. And then my father-in-law decided he was going to take his retirement savings and start to E-trade during the day and shift these accounts around and buy and sell. And he lost everything. They literally lost everything. And we and my wife and her sister and brother have tried to help them because they've really got not much coming in and a whole lot. They've got a double mortgage on their home. It's just a really sad situation. But debt is just hanging over them like a cloud. And you don't want to be, I know most of you can't even imagine being 60 years old like me or 70. But the fact is that you don't want to get to a situation in your life where debt is just a burden that just hangs on you. So let's avoid that. And let's talk about, if you do have some debt, how to get out of that. And I'm going to tell you what Dave Ramsey would recommend you do. And this is what's worked for tons of people. Most people get some credit card debt. They owe money on a car. They buy some other stuff and they just get a little bit out of control and behind. So they start making minimum payments on their cards. You know what I'm talking about? You make a minimum payment. And what that means is then the credit card company says, yes, now thank you for the $15 minimum payment. Now we're going to sock you with 21% interest or 18% interest on the rest of the money you owe us. So it's not only like you got to pay back the principal, but this added interest, and it starts to pile up and pile up. Some of you are familiar with this. If you're not, if you're like, hey, I don't even know what you're talking about, be cool. Just act like you're taking notes. This will be a relaxing call for you. If you're in debt or it's starting to pile up, then you need to listen. So I'm going to give you a few steps to get out of debt. So understand this. Number one, and these are baby steps from financial peace. Baby step number one, Ramsey says best thing you can do is to save $1,000. That's US, or translated into your currency. Save $1,000 for your starter emergency fund. That's the first thing you got to do if you have some debt building up, is you got to save $1,000 or the equivalent as fast as you can. I mean, as fast as you can. That's for a starter emergency fund that'll cover unexpected life events that you don't plan for. I don't want to have people raise hands and go, who's in debt or who's got an emergency fund? But if you have an emergency fund, it covers stuff like surprise expenses. Like we just had this massive winter storm here in the States. So guess what? When the freeze happened and people weren't taking care of the pipes in their flats and their apartments, what happened? The pipes burst. That is a major plumbing expense. That is where if you have money in a little emergency fund, that's where that goes. If you have a medical bill, if you're like, oh my gosh, I broke my arm, I wasn't expecting that. Well, instead of getting out the MasterCard saying, hey, here we go, I'm going to just charge it off, you've got a little starter emergency fund. So step one, put away $1,000 as fast as you can. And it might take you time to do that. Most of you can't go, oh, $1,000 here, just set that in this account. No, what he'd say is take your time, do it as fast as you possibly can, cut back if you need to, don't go out as much to eat. You may need to trim, there are people that he helped that actually sold a car they couldn't afford. They were making these extreme car payments because they had to have this really cool sports car, convertible, had to have it so they could look cool driving around the city. Well, what did they do? To save money, they sold their car and they got one that was a little more modest, okay? So more on that in a minute, but he says keep that little starter emergency fund in a separate account so you won't spend it accidentally or on purpose for things that really aren't emergencies, okay? You don't want to dig into a deeper hole while you're trying to work out the debt. Okay, so that's step one. Baby step two. This is the critical one. If you don't get anything I say today, this is the one to get if you're in debt. Step two is to pay off all debt, except for if you own a house, a condo, some kind of apartment. If you own it, not rent it, own it, this doesn't count. That's not really debt, that you're building equity, all right? But pay off all debt using what he calls a debt snowball. A debt snowball. Let me describe a debt snowball. You start by listing all of your debts that you owe outside of owning a home or whatever, okay, or a flat. List your debt. If you've bought a car and you're making payments, list how much you pay every month. If you have a university loan as a student, write down how much you have to pay off. Probably you have credit card debt. Write down how much you pay, how much you owe on that, right? Store cards, oh gosh, got my Neiman Marcus card. Fine. Write down how much you owe on that. Petroleum cards for gasoline. Write down how much you put down in order in the balance from the smallest that you owe. This is key, from the smallest to the biggest. Okay? So whatever you owe the least on in debt, that's what you're going to start with. And you're going to use what we call the debt snowball method. And you're going to knock out each of your debts one by one. So what he says you need to do is you attack the first balance on your list. And you pay as much as you can each month while you're paying the minimum payments on your other debts. Okay? So you take the littlest one. Let's say you owe $200 toward your Neiman Marcus account, and you've been paying, these little tiny minimum payments, and that it's been building up. Go for the smallest, sell what you need to sell. I don't know, do anything for extra income, work harder, but you want to get rid of that little payment, that first debt quickly. And that's what you want to do. When you've got it paid off, then you move to the next payment and you start attacking it. And most people will just pay off minimums every month if they're in the hole, and they get farther and farther behind. So he's going to say, take that little tiny debt, or it may not be tiny, but take your smallest one and attack it and attack it and attack it and make sure it gets wiped out. Then move to the next one. Does that make sense, everybody? So you got to start with the smallest, go to the biggest. There's he's got lots of testimonials on his website, which is daveramsey.com. He's got some YouTube videos of families. There's a family on there that they had decided when they got married that they not only needed a nice house, but a big, nice house. So they overbought on their house. In America, we call that they were house poor. I used to go in people's homes when I was selling books, and they had live in this mansion. You're like, holy cow, look at the outside of this house. And inside, they were renting furniture, and they were supplying themselves with things they couldn't afford just to make it to their neighbors. They would look better, okay? But then they would give me a check and say, can you hold this for 2 weeks? I'm like, holy cow. So they were in massive debt, but when you looked at their home or you looked at the car they drove, you'd say, wow, these people are living high. They're doing awesome. But they weren't. They were just swimming to keep their head above the water. Does anybody know people like that? Yeah, there are people like that, and that's okay. This is how to get out of it. So step 1, starter emergency fund. Step 2, you want to make sure you start a debt snowball. The reason it's called a snowball is if you've ever built a snowman. I'm trying to relate to people in Northern Europe. If you've ever built a snowman, then you take a little tiny snowball and you start to roll it in the snow. And as you roll it, or it goes down a hill, it becomes a much larger snowball. So in much the same way, you're going to start with a little bit of debt, wipe that one out, and then take on the bigger and bigger and bigger ones, okay? So it's hard work, but it's what winning looks like. And the small wins that you make at the beginning will keep you motivated to dump all of your debt. This is really a mindset, and you really have to get pissed off at your debt. It's really hard to work and feel like you're winning and life is good if you're getting all these bills. And some of us get bills and we just go, oh my gosh, a bill. I am just going to put this over here where I can't see it. And somehow it'll just go away. It will not. People will start calling you. It's bad. Don't do that. I'm speaking on behalf of my in-laws. Not cool. So step 1, you know what it is, save $1,000. Step 2, start a debt snowball. And it may take a long time to do that, but that's what you have to do. All right, step 3, and this will be the last major point here, is save 3 to 6 months of expenses in a fully funded emergency fund. Save 3 to 6 months of your expenses, living expenses, in a fully funded emergency fund. The one I mentioned in step 1 was just a starter emergency fund. If something goes wrong, you know, your car, the engine conks out or something, that will help you there. But to fully fund your emergency living and not go into debt, you need to fully fund it. What does that mean? 3 to 6 months of your expenses. And you're like, well, how much is that? You know, a great step for you would be to have a budget. I never liked budgets. I didn't like doing budgets. I felt like it was restricting me somehow. But a budget is a great way to start, and I can send you a link on how to start off in a budget. But let's assume that you paid off your debt. Woo! Way to go. But you don't want to slow down. You want to take the money that you were putting toward your debt and start to build this fully funded emergency fund to cover 3 to 6 months of your expenses. That sounds like a lot of money. It should be, but this is to protect you from life's bigger surprises. Like, I don't know, if you were to lose your job, God forbid, at LGFG, or your car didn't just have a water pump go out, but the engine completely died, or you had a wreck. I mean, if you've got that much cash saved up 3 to 6 months, you don't have to slip back into debt to cover the emergencies. All right. So again, put your savings, if you're actually serious about this, in a separate account where you won't be like, oh, well, you know what? I really like this cool jacket. I'm going to go ahead and just buy that. You don't want to touch this. You want to set it aside. It's a long-term investment. Okay. So those are the 3 steps I want you to consider today if you're running a little bit in debt. If you do those things, really money management is just a discipline issue, just like managing your time. We've all got the same amount of time in the day, but it's how you use your time that makes you effective or not. Now, all of us have different incomes right now because we're in different places at LGFG. You know, as far as effort, everybody's working hard and getting lots of activity. That's really cool. And when you start to make those sales, that's great. The income goes up, but you've really got to protect. And what I always did as a rule of thumb, and we'll talk more about this next week, is your attitude about money. I always, when I really wanted something, I mean, you guys know how this is. If you see something on TV or in a magazine or online, you're like, oh, that would be really cool to have. If you're the type of impulsive buyer that goes, not only do I want that, but I'm going to actually get it right now. Click, click, click. Yes, Amazon, you know, and it's in my house in 2 days. Amazon Prime. That's not how you want to do it. I always did this. That's something cool I want. I'm going to wait a week or two and see how badly I need that. Now that's an attitude, that's a discipline. And if I still really wanted it a week or two from then I would start to look at my savings and see if it fit into my budget and if it made sense, okay? But if not, we can't just have everything we want right now, you know? If my wife just, I'm thankful that my wife is a thrifty person. She's parsimonious. How's that for a good word? She's very, some people would call it, using slang, she's very tight with our money. So she, even though in terms of wealth management, we've got a Merrill Lynch guy who manages all our money and it's all put away and we're completely debt free and we've already paid off our house ahead of time. Woohoo! I'm not gonna sit here and brag, but we're in a good financial place. That's because of the decisions we made when we were 20 and 30 years old and the habits we formed when we were young, okay? So my wife still will find a Groupon or a coupon and she's like, let's go out to eat. I'm like, that's cool. I'm like, where do you have a coupon for? So she pulls them out. And, you know, some people say, wow, that's really cheap. Surely you can afford going out to eat and paying full price. We could, but we don't. And it's nice to have enough wealth to be able to share it with other people. You know, it's a good thing. So we'll talk more about your attitude about finances maybe next time. But those are the 3 steps I want you to concentrate on if you're running a debt right now. Okay? Any questions or comments or real life stories? Like, go ahead. Who is it?
Eustace.
Eustace, hi.
I have been listening for Dave Ramsey for many years, and I just love him. So I highly recommend you like his page on Facebook and listen. Yeah. And also, what I did, I gave the book to my girlfriend, so she reads it. So we are on the same page. So kind of she understands why I make some decisions, and then, you know, we are on board.
Eustace, that's so smart, because if you have a girlfriend or partner or wife or husband or whatever, and you're on different pages financially, big problems. So Eustace is wise beyond his years to try to help both of you and come to an agreement about money. In most relationships, I've noticed there is a giver, one who's kind of like this with money, woo, and there's one who's sort of a saver. I'm a little more woohoo, and my wife is more like and in the long run, I'm happy about that. But be on the same page. What a great idea, sharing that book. So did you give her financial peace or the total money makeover, Eustace?
Total money makeover. Okay. And I have it in my iPad, so if somebody wants, just message me.
Nice. Okay, well, I'll send out a link or two in my follow-up to this call. And be sure to check out Dave Ramsey on Facebook. Great idea, Eustace. Anybody else want to admit the fact that they're $80,000 in debt and want to talk about it? Okay. All right. I know I am not a money guy. I don't really like talking about money. If people write back to me and say, how much should I put in my Roth IRA and my 401k plan or blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I'm not That's why I have someone who manages it for me. And if you're like 25 or 30 years old, you're like, I would recommend this. Get a financial planner that you trust that will help you with your money management. You're like, Lee, I don't have any money to manage. I know, but you should get someone you trust to help you. And as you do get better and you start to accrue wealth and for sure get out of debt, they can help you if they're experts in that field. So get with somebody that you know, that you trust. Ask someone maybe older in the business if they have somebody they like, and take it from there. So I'll let you guys go. Thank you for tuning in. Continue to be leaders. We're going to do a little short series on financial peace and money management, since that's an issue for a lot of people. And we're going to win. So keep up the great work. All right? Goodbye. Have a pleasant day. See you.
Project, keep your hands off of my side. Money is a hit.